Welcome to the Lost in Transition podcast. I am your host, Chris Gerard. Lana Burl joining me here in a minute. In the middle of July, sweltering summer heat. Hope your race season is going well, though. Remember to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, the TuneIn Radio app. Also on YouTube now. We keep adding venues for you to be able to download the show. Available always at the website, losttransition.com. And if you're already subscribed, thank you. Please rate and review. Helps us know what we're doing that is helpful to you and how we can improve the show in the future. Also, let us know who you'd like to hear on upcoming shows. You can connect at losttransition.com, Facebook, and Twitter for all of the social media updates. Coming up next week on the show, Great Britain's Tim Don, former ITU star and current Ironman world record holder, setting the fastest Ironman time just 6 weeks ago at Ironman South America's championship in Brazil, in a time of 7:40:23. Not bad for 39 years old. Watch that show. Watch for that show in your feed later next week. This week, on the other end of the age spectrum, we're very excited to have junior elite triathlete Addison Smith on the program. She just won the Flatland Junior Elite Triathlon last weekend and finished third overall at USAT's Sprint Nationals in Omaha last year. Later on in the show, we'll also talk to USAT's Steve Kelly to get some additional background information on what USAT is doing to grow the youth and junior programs in the United States and what resources are available for young triathletes. Looking forward to that coming up after Addison Smith, next on the Lost in Transition podcast. Addison Smith is a junior elite triathlete. She also races cross country and swims for Baylor School in Chattanooga. Now that summer is here, she's competing on the junior elite circuit and is just off a win at the Flatland Junior Elite Triathlon in Iowa last weekend. Addison, welcome to Lost in Transition.
Thank you.
All right, so you've been racing for a long time. As far back as the Internet Archives could go, I saw something in the Knoxville News Sentinel. I think you were 12 at the time. How long have you been racing for?
I started youth triathlon when I was around 7. I think my first one was like the West Side Y.
All right.
Sharks.
Nice.
And I've just been racing ever since then, swimming, cross country.
How'd you get started with it? What prompted you to do a triathlon?
Well, my dad did them before I was born. And since I was always swimming and running, he always wanted me to do it. I was kind of intimidated, but I did my first one and I loved it, so kept going.
Well, that West Side Y one is a little bit of a kick in the teeth to start out with all the hills on the bike. It's kind of an interesting one for those not local to the area. It's kind of set on the side of a ridge, so everything's uphill, downhill. It's almost technical in the rain. What came first, biking, running, swimming, or did they all just kind of come along at the same time?
I've always been swimming, and I ran in elementary school, and then my dad kind of had to teach me the bike, and that was definitely the hardest part. But now I really train all of them, but still a strong swimmer, as I've always been.
How easy is it to find a good triathlon bike when you're 7, 8, 9 years old?
I think it was very hard. They searched on eBay. I had a little tiny road bike, and yep. I've always had to have special fits for them ever since, but now they make custom youth ones because there are so many more kids growing in the sport.
You race a little bit of both. You race some local races, just open age group. We actually raced in Oak Ridge a couple weeks ago. You finished way ahead of me. I heard your name like as I was on the second lap of the run, and I'm like, that figures, that makes sense. How easy or difficult is it for you to find competitive races in the younger age groups? Obviously, with the junior elite specific races, those are more challenging, but just even as far as local races, is there anywhere you can go to get good competition?
There were some bigger sprint tries that had a bigger youth category, and that's when the Southeastern High Performance team was going, and I would travel around to Atlanta and Nashville, and there were a lot of strong kids out there, but now I mostly stick to the local ones because I'm on the Health Shoppe team, and then travel all over the country for the elite races.
So what's been your favorite location to race?
My favorite race was in Omaha. I wouldn't say it's the most beautiful. I haven't really gone anywhere amazing, but Omaha or in Seattle, Washington.
Last year, you mentioned Omaha. So you were on the top podium for the Sprint Nationals. And it was part of an an all-Tennessee sweep. We had Kirsten Sass from Mackenzie. We've had Kirsten on the show. And Laura Matthews out of Memphis. And then you were third on the podium. What was that experience like? Did you know that you were in third place when you crossed the line?
I had no idea. I knew I was the first of my age group because it started in waves, but I had no idea I was third, especially to the other Tennessee ladies. That was really great.
We mentioned both draft, legal, and time trial formats for the bike, and you've done both. Do you have a preference between the two, and what are some differences outside of the obvious that you don't have the aero bars, but is there anything tactically that you maybe do differently in a drafting versus non-drafting race?
Oh yeah, for sure. In the draft legal, I'm mostly in packs from around 2 to 5 riders, so you don't have to work as much, and the courses are laps, pretty technical, while the time trial are pretty hilly and not as technical. But I think I like the draft legal more, but I have been working on my biking, so I can really do both now.
I was going to say a draft legal tends to favor someone who's a strong swimmer and then finishes with a strong run. You can kind of, like you said, work together on the bike. But that time trial style definitely means a strong bike is necessary. And now, obviously, as you've been getting older, your bike has been really coming along these last couple of years.
Thanks. Yeah, I've been working on it a lot. I've gone through lots of new bikes because I'm growing out of them so quickly, but it's the riding around here it's tough, and so whenever I go to other races, it sure is a lot easier than riding around the mountains out here.
So you attend Baylor School, and there you're swimming and doing cross country. So do you work the triathlon? How does that work that you're on those teams that are obviously seasonal? How does that work with your triathlon schedule?
Yeah, my coaches have been a really big help. Swim season is all year round, but the competitive season is in the winter, but ends around the time of the first early season triathlons, which is, I've kind of learned, I'm still learning how to deal with that, but cross country is in the fall. So
for your year then, because you've got swimming all year round, competitive in the winter, and you've got this cross country season and then triathlon season, do you find that you have like breaks during the year? Are there some couple of times a year where you kind of have a rest period and just kind of chill out?
The end of the summer after my races, it's a little bit of a break, and Christmas time there's not very many meets or races, but it's a big training block for sure. That's about it.
Okay, so pretty much you're kind of going all year round. Okay. That's got to keep your family hopping then, too. Do your parents get to come down to most of your events? Do they see you race? Mm-hmm. They come down to my cross-country races, but it ended up that my state swim meet is here, and this year Junior Nationals for swimming is in town, so I think they're pretty excited about that. Oh, nice. Yeah. I can understand that. I remember my brother played travel hockey, and I can remember the miles that my parents put on both vehicles to support that. So also at Baylor, so how has that been going? You've been at Baylor for a couple of years, and obviously they have a really strong athletic program and strong academics. Has that really helped you, prepare for triathlon? How do you fit everything in? It is really tough. I've been kind of doing it all my life, like the hard school, but also like working in the practices. I have to get up early every morning to get a swim or a run in. I think college might even be easier than right now. Probably. But for triathlon, for sure, it is really tough, especially getting the bike in. My dad will come down on weekends sometimes, and we'll bike around there, but mostly I'm swimming and running when I'm down there all the time. Do you have classmates that participate in triathlon? No, I'm pretty much the only one. I try to get some of my swim friends in it, but none of them want to run, and none of my running friends want to swim.
They'll get tired of the black line in the pool eventually. We've had so many converted swimmers on this program. They will wear out on that someday, but not quite yet. So you mentioned college, and I know you're probably sick of hearing questions like this, but has there been people that have come after you from like the NCAA triathlon side of things? Any thoughts as to where you might be looking at?
Yeah, I've definitely had interest from the triathlon, but I think I'm going to swim in college, and I don't know, I might work my triathlon in just in the summers, but I think I'm going to swim D1 competitively. That's my goal.
It probably opens up a far wider array of options than triathlon. I know when we were covering that last year, I believe, 10 or 12 schools currently offering it?
It's growing.
It's certainly growing, but swimming obviously gives you a lot more options. So that's interesting. What events do you swim? Short, medium, long?
I kind of have to swim everything, but I swim a lot of the IMs, and distance freestyle are my forte, I would say, but my coach kind of relies on me in everything.
Which one is your favorite, though? What do you enjoy the most?
Probably the 500 free and 400 IM.
Okay, yeah. So in the world of pool swimming, yes, definitely some distance.
Now for the real question, could you win your age group still at some of these local races with doing all the different strokes? I know you could. I'll save you answering that. If you wanted to really rub it in, just, start backstroking.
Maybe that would have worked better at the Oak Ridge to backstroke through all the walkways.
I heard that was a little bit of chaos.
We got to cover this. I know, we got listeners, all over the country and all over the world, but this is worth talking about as a national issue of pressing importance in triathlon. If you do a triathlon in a pool where you can stand up, please don't walk in front of people. If you have to walk to make it where you need to in back of the pack, that's
and we should inform our listeners. So this is a pool in Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Yes.
It is a 100-meter spring-fed pool. It's very unique. It's open only in the summer. And this particular race does wave starts, and it does 500 meters. And I know that they don't use traditional lane lines. It's more of a rope. And
so there's chop. It's open water swimming.
It's open water swimming, except that you're trying to put 15 or 20 people in a wave down a single lane line, and I heard people said they get caught up, so they would stop and stand, and they figured out walking was faster than swimming. Except you must have been in a wave, not at the front.
No, I think, started 6 minutes behind some of the men and ended up coming out with some of them because it was just chaos. Like, might as well be swimming in the lake. It was crazy. So
you're ready for a mass start Ironman.
Yes,
I'm just going to tell you that right now. So, when it comes to USAT, and we're going to talk to also another with USAT about their programs, we know that they have some special development opportunities. And I remember that last year you attended a development camp that had Gwen Jorgenson present. Tell us a little bit about that experience. What was that like?
It was amazing. It was Gwen and Katie Zaferes, the other Olympian. And it was one of the greatest weekends of my life. It was I'm really close friends with all the girls now. It's just great, like, training with the other girls in the country that do triathlon full-time and are elite. And it was really interesting hearing Gwen and Katie's traveling stories and how they deal with it. And it was also great being in Colorado. That was my first time altitude.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah.
So were you right in Colorado Springs?
Mm-hmm, at the training center, Olympic Training Center.
Great. Did they take you out for any epic rides, or did they?
We didn't have our bikes because it was just a weekend.
Okay.
And it ended up that they had drained the pool to clean it after the Olympics.
Oh, no.
So we were swimming in a little 24-hour fitness pool, but the runs were amazing.
Uh-huh. And, are you able to, do you stay in touch with either Gwen or Katie now? And I'm sure you're following them, but.
Yeah, I follow them. I don't
you're not
communicate, but
anything,
I'm sure if I saw them, I would talk to them. But it was great. It's not every day you see 15-year-old girls that are as into triathlon and train in triathlon all the time, because I'm always just with people who swim or run.
Right. So now you get to see your friends again when you race. I'm sure in Iowa recently that was probably nice to catch up with your buddies.
Yeah, Flatland Junior Elite, that was just last weekend, so that's a quick turnaround here. We're recording this on a Tuesday, so you've just been back in town for a little bit. Traveling 2 races, is this all long miles in the car, or do you fly to some of them?
The only one we flew to was in Seattle last year, so we drove to Omaha and drove to Iowa last week.
And we know you won Iowa. What was the race like? Can you give us a little bit of a little race report?
Yeah, well, thankfully, my age group started first at 7 a.m., so it wasn't too hot. It was still pretty warm, but I came out of the swim pretty strong ahead, and then one of my teammates actually, we ended up working together on the bike out front, just two of us. But then she pulled out before the run because she's going to the Tri Pan American race in Magog this weekend.
Okay.
And I had about a 30-second lead going out on the run, and I kept it, which I was really proud of because I've been really struggling with my run this year, and everything kind of came into place, so I was really happy with that.
Nice. Did they make up any ground on you? Could you hear her behind you?
I think she made up about 10 seconds.
Okay, but you held her off.
Yeah.
And what were the distances of this race?
It was a 750-meter swim, a 12-mile bike, and a 5K run, which is the standard sprint distance and for the junior elite category.
And you mentioned one of your teammates. So are you on a team now? What is your team?
I'm on Z3 Triathlon, which is based in Des Moines. There are people from all over the country on my team, and it's really great. I love it.
How do you guys communicate? Are you, Snapchat, Twitter?
Yeah, Snapchat, Twitter, and I have a call with the coach every weekend to stay in touch.
This is Lana saying, what are the kids doing these days?
Hey, I know. Well, it's always interesting, that I can ask you this question in 6 months and probably get a different answer because the technology is always shifting. But having a team like that where you have, members across the country, communication used to be, more challenging, but today I'm glad you guys have tools that are easy and fun to use.
So you mentioned, the distance that you did in Flatlands, and generally this junior elite thing, really they're trying to develop talent toward that ITU set of things where it is more of short course racing, you're not doing Ironman. Just personally, what have you done as far as distances, Olympic, half Iron? Have you done any of the longer stuff, or is that something that's of interest to do?
I tried an Olympic when I was younger just for fun, but I think the youth development coaches like to keep them short and fast rather than learning to do
Very
a 5-hour bike ride.
Right.
Yeah. So I've mostly kept to the short distances.
And that makes perfect sense. People like me mess around with everything and are good at nothing. So they want you to be good. They want you to be focused and ready to do that with swimming and running. You challenge enough, certainly. For
sure. Now, so do you have any, when you kind of think long term, obviously you're doing the short stuff right now, but long term, what kind of goals do you have in the sport?
I get asked this a lot.
Sure, yeah.
I think if I stay, I'm going to stay in triathlon, but I would rather stay on the draft legal Olympic type racing. Maybe when I'm older, do an Ironman, but I don't know. Right now, I prefer the draft legal elite style.
How many opportunities each year are there to race draft legal? Obviously, there's nothing right in your own backyard here. So all of them involve travel. But the breakdown between the non-draft and the draft, I guess, how many of each roughly do you do each year?
I think I do around 4 or 5 of the draft legal, and I would probably say around the same 4 or 5 of the non-draft race. I like both a lot, but the draft legal requires more travel time, and it's more expensive. So to make up some of that draft legal, do you ever do any bike racing? Yeah, I've gotten into some of the local crits.
All right.
They're intense, but I like it because it is practice for the racing style that I do.
I was going to say it's a lot closer than anything else that you could do.
So looking forward here, obviously Flatland, the local race, Secret City, just in the past here recently. Coming up on your schedule for the rest of the year, what's coming up on the calendar?
I'm doing the high school state championships in a few weeks, and then youth elite nationals, and then I'm going to sprint nationals in Omaha.
And this is over the next how long?
Around a month.
Oh, okay.
I was going to say, it's a busy summer, because I was going to say, wow, Omaha, I know it's August 12th and 13th.
Right, exactly.
Wow. And then you must be back to school right after that.
Yeah, I drive back halfway, and then the next day I drive back halfway and go to school the next day, I think.
Okay, and then into cross-country season. Well, it must be nice, though, for your coaches, because you show up into cross-country season already fit. You've been going all summer, so Do you like, how does it compare? Do you enjoy the triathlon racing more, or do you like the meets that you do for cross country and swimming? I mean, they're obviously a little different. But.
Yeah, they're all different. I like triathlon because it's kind of different. I get to do all three, but cross country I really love. Like, my team is really great, and I like cross country, but I get more nervous running one of those than a triathlon.
Okay.
I think it's just there's not as much pressure because in a triathlon you have time to make up on the next leg other than just the cross country. And swim meets are just a whole different ball game. Prelim, finals, like multiple different races. So they're all different, and I will love them the same.
Very good.
Lana, you mentioned showing up fit for cross country season, but what do you do to make sure you're not overtraining on the triathlon season and showing up burnt out going into your cross country and swim seasons? How do you balance that?
Yeah, that's a hard one. Right now I'm still running like quite a bit of mileage, but not too much where I'm burnt out, you would say. Kind
of a maintaining versus building.
Base mileage. But during cross country season we ramp up the mileage, and especially like swim, the yardage, which sometimes gets really hard with double practices. But right now in the summer, I'm doing Orange Theory Fitness. I don't know if y'all know that. Yeah. It's really great because I get running and strength in at the same time. And that's actually helped me get the most fit I've ever been without pounding the mileage on
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
road.
Well, it almost sounds like, your training is compartmentalized during the year, which actually, from what I've seen on the coaching side of things, is a really good way to approach it, to work on specific things at a given time. A lot of people are just doing that because it's their weak point and they want to be better on the bike or better on the run. But you've kind of got that built into your schedule, so in a way it's kind of convenient, I guess.
It's definitely I like the cross-training part because if I'm really hurting, my legs are really hurting from run, I can go get in a good swim. And if my shoulders are hurting from swim, I can go to get in a good run. And I'm not just overdoing the run or swim both at the same time.
So locally, we know that you race with the Zen Evo group. So that must be fun to reconnect with them in the summer. And I know they follow you a lot. So do you get inspiration and
Oh, definitely. It's the team, like I've been on it for, I think this is my third year, and it's just grown so much. Like Alan is out winning all these Ironmans, and Jack McAfee's doing really well, and I'm kind of on a different part, like I'm the short fast, and they can all just go for hours, and it's really like a good balance, but they are definitely very inspiring.
Yeah, you've certainly got a fan club here locally. In fact, one of our followers, Brad Grindstaff, was saying we need to get your autograph before you get too famous.
So you've got support in the sport. You've got some of these older athletes that you've been working with. Do you have a mentor in the sport? Do you have someone that you can kind of confide in or ask questions of or just kind of throw ideas at?
I mean, Gwen and Katie at the camp were definitely like very mentoring, and I don't like keep in touch with them, but they were just very inspiring, and they are definitely like some mentors. To like consulting with them then was really great. Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Them.
Great.
Well, and because of how the USAT youth and junior elite programs have grown really since around 2000 when it became an Olympic sport, there's not as much I guess depth to draw on maybe as some of the more established sports. If you were looking for someone to learn the ropes from for cross country or swimming, obviously those have been around forever, but triathlon, at least in that youth format, is really quite new still. And so I'm sure every opportunity you get to not only learn from people who have been through that process, but also, like you mentioned, get together with people. I mean, you're at your school, you're the only fish in the triathlon pond. That's it. So I'm sure that's nice when you can be able to learn and share with that. And so the next few weeks, like you mentioned, quite a few races coming up. And now the Nationals obviously is open, and the other two, I believe, that you mentioned were junior elite races. Is that correct?
Yes.
Excellent. So we'll post those links up to those races too, so we can all watch for the results.
Yes.
We'll be rooting for you there, and great luck in all of the stuff coming up for you, and also in the cross country and swim as you come up into that year as well. So Addison Smith, once again, thanks for joining us on the Lost in Transition
Thanks
podcast.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up after a break, we talk to Steve Kelly from USAT's junior and under 23 programs on what they're doing to help athletes like Addison compete for the United States on the world stage, and what you can do to support young people getting into the sport, coming up next on the Lost in Transition podcast. Steve Kelly is the junior and under 23 program manager for USA Triathlon, joining us on the show today to talk about getting young people involved in triathlon and how USAT helps develop top talent starting at a young age. Steve, welcome to Lost in Transition.
Hey, thanks for having me.
USAT has been involved now for some time with the junior athletes. How many years has the program been around for opportunities for junior elites to race, and what's the status right now? Is it still growing compared to a few years ago?
It's definitely still growing. We sort of measure our growth each year, in part through the demand of entry into our Youth Elite and Junior Elite Cup races, and there are 5 or 6 of those each season, plus the national championships. Well, it got started really back when triathlon was added to the Olympic Games. There was certainly some activity in the mid-1990s, and I would say programmatically it was a little bit looser, but the coaches and federation folks back in the mid-90s had a few camps, and they brought a few teams to world championships. But the format really took shape shortly after the first Olympic Games for triathlon in 2000. And some of the people involved at the federation at that time started to organize developmental programs, thinking ahead, thinking, okay, we just got through our first Olympic Games. Now we're going to have to start to identify younger athletes. Most of the athletes that competed for that first Olympic Games team had, I would call, self-identified into the sport, either through doing Iron Kids races like a Hunter Kemper, or had come into the sport as an adult. And we started to shift towards a more programmatic focus. So the origins of what we have now are about 15 years old.
So today, what kind of resources and support are available to, these youth and junior racers that you are identifying now at a younger age? Clearly, they're not like most age groupers who have the job that supports their interests,
Right.
So what do you do from a USAT standpoint?
Yeah, so if we start from the top down, which is the World Championship, once an athlete reaches the sort of pinnacle of junior racing, that's the Junior Elite World or Junior World Championships. We in the U.S. kind of tag it with the word elite as a way to differentiate it from the non-drafting format. So if a coach or an athlete sees the word Youth Elite or Junior Elite, it's really a signature of a draft legal race as opposed to needing a different license. But if you start with the World Championship level, those are fully funded teams. So once the athletes for those teams are identified, all the travel, all the hotel, all the coaching support, equipment needs are taken care of. And then the next step below that from a championship level is actually the race that we're heading up to in Canada this weekend, and that is the what's called the CamTri Junior Championships. It's really the continental championship, so it involves the North, South, Central Americans, and the islands. And we bring all these juniors together, and they race for spots at the World Championship. So there's quite a bit of funding that goes into supporting that team. We have 18 athletes and 4 coaches that'll be heading up to Canada tomorrow and Thursday, and we'll support them, in that event. And then the other thing we start to do as athletes move up that pyramid, so to speak, is we look for targeted developmental opportunities, racing-wise. For instance, this year we'll be bringing some athletes over to Lausanne in Switzerland for the European Junior Cup. Last year we went to Kitzbühel, and the year before that we went to Holten in the Netherlands. And the goal with those races is to take athletes who are starting to emerge as international class juniors and get them comfortable with not only the format of racing in Europe, but also their peers in Europe. And they start to make friends with the British athletes and the French athletes and get to, just get to know their competition on a more personal basis. And we find that they actually, being teenagers, they actually make friends pretty quickly. And, we see those bonds developing that often carry over into the elite ranks. The other thing I'd mention in terms of support is our funding of the high performance team program. And one thing we did in 2008 was we decentralized how we ran the national team for juniors. It used to be that we had what was called the select national team. So somebody like me would sit down in January and decide which juniors to put on that select team for the year, and they would get the bulk of the funding. What we decided to do is decentralize that and fund the growth of teams instead. So we went from roughly 6 or 7 teams in 2008, trying to add 4 or 5 teams per year, really getting the quality versus quantity, and putting funding into developing those programs. So today we have about 40 teams that are actively identifying and developing draft legal talent in the U.S. with the aim of adding a few more each year as we identify coaches and programs that are passionate about that particular part of our mission. So there's a considerable amount of money that goes into helping get those teams off the ground.
It definitely sounds like that. And I know the goal of USAT is obviously to have a strong presence when it comes to the Olympics and the world scene. So how many athletes participate in sort of the traditional time trial racing that age groupers do versus the draft legal? What's kind of that breakdown?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd give you a firm number on the non-drafting side, but I can tell you that on the draft legal side, there's for each particular race that we host, there are 300 spots. So we pretty much fill those races. Each month we have one. Sometimes June, July we have 2 per month. And the athletes are traveling in with those high performance teams from all over the country. So each one of those nets about 300 participations, individual participations. And then if you spread that out over the course of the season, obviously there's different athletes doing different races. So some athletes might do 4, some might do 1. So when we start to aggregate, it's around 500 that are really focused on the draft legal portion of the sport from age 13 to 19. When we go to the non-drafting, you have to look at a much wider range of races, everything from the local sprints and even the upper level kids races, where they might have some 14, 15-year-olds still participating in those, all the way up to a race like the sprint distance national championship. So in a race like that, you'll get, I would say, a couple hundred athletes in the under 20 ranks that are participating there. So it's a different focus. In the past year we added the high school championship, and that's just starting to take off in terms of national interest. But we've added 18 state championships so far, and that's almost twice the goal for year one to get those state championships going. And then we've added the high school championship, which is in its second year, and they had about 120 athletes come this year, I believe. So, it's definitely growing, but it's hard to exactly measure because it's so spread out when you talk about non-drafting racing, and there's literally a couple thousand races they could do in the course of a season.
Sure.
So certainly, Steve, as you're looking, like you say, at the non-drafting, it's a very wide, assortment. A lot of people have seen young people racing at local sprints, and of course, the draft legal is much more on the elite side of the sport. But depending, regardless, what can age group triathletes like us do to support USAT's youth and junior racers? What are some good ways to get young people plugged into the sport and support what you do?
That's a really good question. One of the things that when we look at our competition worldwide, one of the things that's really helpful in some of the other countries is the club system. And that we know that, in France, for instance, they have a very robust club system that has youth athletes all the way up through, the older age groups, and they're all participating on the same club. In the U.S., we've had this growing effort to grow triathlon clubs and to make them more relevant to the type of racing that goes on in the U.S. Sometimes there's some reluctance, I think, with triathlon clubs to delve into the youth side of it. And it may be that they feel like, well, we don't quite have the expertise to coach them, or potentially there's some liability when involving youth into an adult club. But that's one of the areas that would really be helpful to USAT, is if more of the existing club structure that we have had that outreach and made the younger athletes feel more engaged in the sport and more sort of relevant to the sport. I know one thing that has always been a struggle when you take a brand new say, young teen or an older youth athlete, and they start to make that transition from doing just youth races to the adult age group sprint races or super sprints. And they show up, and maybe there's not a whole lot of people their age, and it feels like a little bit of disconnect between, their peer group and the group that's predominant in that race. The club system can help overcome that if some of those clubs have more youth participants. I know the race directors will always be happy to have more participants in their race, and usually when they start to see a critical mass of 15 to 19-year-olds, they'll create additional waves for them to start and greater recognition. But the club system would be very, very helpful. USAT offers a youth and junior certification. So if a club has a certified coach that's working with them and feels like, well, I know a lot about coaching 40-year-olds, but I don't know much about 15-year-olds, they could take that clinic and gain some credentials, and probably get a lot more comfortable with the idea of it. They don't have to be worrying about junior elite and draft legal and all the nuances of ITU rules. It's just they would understand the system a little bit better, so that when that kid comes along and says, hey, I'm interested in joining your club, they kind of know where they fit in the big picture.
Exactly, providing an entry level. And speaking of which, where can people go to learn more about USAT's junior and youth programs and get more information, and follow also some of the amazing elite athletes that USAT has helped grow? Yeah,
a great place to start is on Twitter. I know that's probably the simplest way for people to connect. We have both a Twitter and an Instagram. It's very simple. It's USAT Juniors. It's the same one with an at the beginning for the Twitter. But they can follow us on those pages. We also have a Facebook page with the same description there, USAT Juniors. And if they want to get a direct link to the USAT website, they can go to usatriathlon.org. And there's a specific junior page. We're also working on a more robust youth page that they can access through usatriathlon.org.
We'll link those up in the show notes too, so people can be aware of that and follow you guys there. Steve Kelly with USAT, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
All right, thanks for having me.
Our thanks again to Addison Smith and Steve Kelly for stopping by the Lost in Transition podcast this week. Follow us online at losttransition.com, Facebook and Twitter for social media updates. And if you listen to and enjoy the show, please rate and review. It does help us boost in the rankings and learn what you like about this show, so we can keep making it better and reach more triathletes out there. Tim Don once again coming up next week, a former ITU pro and current Ironman world record holder, setting that record just 6 weeks ago. Excited to talk to him. Watch for that in the feed next week. Until next time, may all your transitions be smooth.